The Fellblade was the main super heavy battle tank of the Legiones Astartes during the Great Crusade, and of course that was because the Space Marines functioned very differently then. They have become a rare sight in the 41st millennium, only seen in the armories of a few first and second founding chapters. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Fellblade, which is effectively a Space Marine baneblade, though with a few less gun options. The Fellblade comes in at a very hefty 535 points, but you're getting a big profile for that at 9 inches of movement, so a little slow for a tank. But it's toughness 13, so very tough for a tank, with a 2+ save, 24 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 8. In terms of ranged weapons, the Heavy Bolter is sustained hits 1 with 3 attacks, hit on 3s, at 36-inch range with strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2, and the twin version of that gains twin linked. The Multi-Melta is Melta 2, 18-inch range with 2 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 9, AP 4, and damage D6. The Heavy Flamer is Torrent, ignores cover, D6 attacks that auto-hit at 12-inch range with strength 5, AP 1, and damage 1, and the twin variant of that gains twin linked. The Quad Las Cannons are 4 attacks that hit on 3s at 48-inch range with strength 12, AP 3, and damage D6+1. The Laser Destroyer is heavy, with 3 attacks that hit on 3s at 36-inch range with strength 14, AP 4, and damage D6+1. The Stormbolter is Rapid Fire 2, with 2 attacks that hit on 3s at 24-inch range with strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. The Fellblade Accelerator Cannon is the main event and it has 2 profiles. The AP round is 2 attacks with Ballistic Skill 3+, at 72-inch range with strength 14, AP 3, and flat damage 6. The Fellblade Accelerator Cannon HE, or High Explosive, is Blast with 2d6 attacks that hit on 3s at 72-inch range with strength 8, AP 1, and damage 2, and a Demolisher Cannon Hull Mounted with d6 + 3 attacks that hit on 3s at 24-inch range with strength 14, AP 3, and damage d6. This is, of course, a super powerful profile to have as effectively an auxiliary weapon and makes this thing quite the formidable package of a lot of strength 14 weaponry and a lot of attacks in general. The melee is completely unimpressive, 6 attacks at strength 8, hit on 4s, not even going to say anymore. In terms of abilities, it is Rolling Fortress. With each in a time and attack targets an allied unit that is not fully visible because of this model, that unit has the benefit of cover. This is a very fun rule that allows your unit to act as almost a buffing piece, and you could make a sort of armored spearhead if you wanted to, with, say, this guy and 2 predators backing it up in the rear so they would always have cover, and allow this thing to move forward very quickly, and allow your things that are a little more fragile to be a little more tough. In terms of ranged weapons, though, of course, the Fellblade Cannon is the main event, though the Demolisher Cannon is super useful to have on tap. This thing will really excel against most kinds of vehicles, and it will do quite well against medium infantry and light infantry, though I will say it does slightly struggle with things like Terminators, as it lacks anything that's innately damage 3. Of course, the Laser Destroyers, Demolisher Cannon, and AP round can all very easily deal with Terminators, but it can be very swingy, though of course the Accelerator Cannon's AP rounds will blow up any kind of Terminator at a failed save, and you have to rely on the random damage of the Laser Destroyer and Demolisher Cannons. But I'm just saying, this guy's probably not the best into Terminators, so you may want to get something that can deal with them more so than just the Fellblade, as while it can handle just about everything, it will struggle with those very tough 2+4+3 wound models. Moving on, we have, of course, the Loadout section. The Fellblade comes standard with the 2 Quad Las Cannons, the Twin Heavy Bolter, the Fellblade Accelerator Cannon, a Demolisher Cannon, and armored tracks. This model's 2 Quad Las Cannons can be replaced with 2 Laser Destroyers, this model's Twin Heavy Bolter can be replaced by 1 Twin Heavy Flamer, and this model can be equipped with one of the following: 1 Heavy Bolter, 1 Multi-Melta, 1 Heavy Flamer, or 1 Stormbolter. Generally, I would bring the Laser Destroyers, as I think their higher strength and AP more than makes up for the slight reduction in shots. In terms of the other weaponry, I think any of them are fine, and since you have a Demolisher Cannon, you'll want to be up close anyways, so the Flamers might be at their best there, so they can clear away things like Gretchen that may be trying to charge you, which would definitely be a problem, but I think the Heavy Bolters and Multi-Meltas also have their place if you just want a little extra anti-marine or anti-tank firepower. In terms of buff options, Techmarines or Warp Smiths allow this thing to be healed and keeps it hitting on 2s, which is just insane the whole way around, and given its slower movement, they can easily keep up. So this is almost a guarantee thing that you must bring to make this thing super effective. Primarchs and Abaddon do have the buffs that can apply to these guys. Abaddon gives rerolls, Rabute gives discount stratagems, and the Lion gives him mortal wound protection. All 3 have their strengths. I'd say Abaddon rerolls are at their best, especially outside of Veterans of the Long War, though, again, targeting this thing with a free stratagem could be a lot of value, especially in things like Siege the Anvil Siege Force, or even just discounting the 5+ sustain from the Iron Storm Spearhead. The Thunderstrike gives us +1 to wound, which is huge on strength 14, meaning they wound effectively everything in the game on 2s except for Titans. The Void Shield Generator is pretty handy. It gives it a 4+ invulnerable, though it would mainly be useful for an Alpha Strike, as you would have to stay really close to it to keep your invuln save, but just to stave off 1 round of combat could be more than enough, or 1 round of shooting, rather. Moving on, we have to cover the detachments. Gladius, of course, is as good as ever. Advance and Shoot is handy. The detachment is just so general that any unit can do well in Gladius, so I'm not even going to spend too much time on that. Iron Storm, this guy will love the rerolls on as big AP shells, and 5+ sustained is really crazy on something that's threatening. If you get any sustained hits on those flat damage 6 attacks, you're doing real good. Similar to Siege Force, hitting on 2s innately is good if this guy can remain stationary, which also gives access to 5+ sustained for 1 command point. And the Laser Destroyers absolutely adore +1 to wound, as that means, again, they'll be wounding effectively everything in the game on 2s. Veterans of the Long Wars for the Traitor gives them rerolling hits, so it's very useful. Soulforged gives you +1 to wound, which is arguably the most impactful buff you can put on this thing, and I would say almost essential. And having it here for just 1 command point to always be at +1 to wound will turn this thing into a menace. It will blow through enemies so efficiently. And Siege Host gives you -1 to wound against higher strength items, so things like railguns, laser destroyers would all be significantly less effective against this guy, which would be nice, as those things could definitely pose a big threat to something even as innately tough as the Fellblade. Moving on, we're just going to cover a little bit of competition, which is pretty much just the Falchion, which is the one we covered the other day, which is the anti-Titan variant of the Fellblade, effectively. However, I don't think that this is to say this thing can't deal with armor. It's just that the Falchion will come into its own against more insane armor, and is also just more... It doesn't need as many buffs to demolish most armor. And honestly, I think both can easily coexist, and if you wanted to go big on the heavy tanks, I don't even think running both of them would be the worst thing in the world. This thing can handle most targets, and anything this thing can't handle, the Falchion most certainly can. Moving on, we have its best use, and the Fellblade is a very super heavy fitting. Like, it's a tank that makes sense. It is huge, it's got a lot of guns, it's very flexible, it's very tough. As I mentioned, everything being strength 14 is great. It'll blow things like Land Raiders apart in an instant. Its alternate fire mode can handle most kinds of infantry very well. Though again, you may slightly struggle with Terminators. That could be easily accounted for. Not only can this thing still deal with them, just it's a little swingy. Things like Redemptors or Brutalis for your Loyalists, or a Forge Fiend for your Traitors can easily patch that weakness. Its defensive buff is definitely very intriguing, allowing, of course, mobile cover, as this thing can just trundle up the board and anything behind it will be significantly tougher for it. You could do some kind of cool armored spearhead designs if you just have, say, this guy up front and a couple of tanks or walkers behind it. This guy can keep them safe while making sure the path is clear, as not a lot of will want to stay in the way of this thing, especially if you pair it with something like Predator Destructors. They could very easily help this thing keep out of combat where it could get bogged down, as its blast weapons would be ineffective. Though again, I think that you would still want this thing to not be the front, just because having something like Assault Intercessors or Outriders running in front of it, just to keep it from getting bogged down by Gretchen, by Guardsmen, would be very useful, as you want this thing ripping off all of those attacks because they're so powerful they will decimate almost any enemy. Anyways, grab a Tech Marine and some Intercessors and go and blow your enemies to pieces. I've been Spoons Rattling. Hope you enjoyed this video.